All right, let's dive right in, shall we? Today, we're taking a deep dive into the world of Robert Bresson. Um, might not be a household name, but trust me on this one.
Yeah, he's a filmmaker, French, and
Definitely not your typical Hollywood director.
right, not at all.
More like a cinematic philosopher, someone who really redefined how we think about stories on film. We're using this great podcast episode, actually. It's called Robert Bresson, the Cinematic Purist.
Ah, purist, that's a good way to put it.
Exactly. So get ready for some serious insights, folks. We're going to uncover some fascinating stuff about Bresson, how he used these models instead of actors, his whole thing about sound being even more important than the visuals, and the massive impact his minimalist style had on legendary filmmakers like Tarkovsky, Godard. The list goes on.
Yeah, his influence is pretty remarkable when you start to look at it.
Absolutely. So buckle up. Get ready to discover why those who, really delve into Bresson's films consider them masterpieces.
Yeah, he's definitely a filmmaker who rewards the patient viewer.
For sure. So let's start with a little bit of background on the man himself. Bresson started out as a painter, right?
He did, and that artistic background, it really comes through in his visual style.
Right, so it wasn't just point shoot for him.
No, no, not at all. Each shot, I mean, it's meticulously composed, often very minimalist, but just incredibly powerful.
You can almost see, the brushstrokes, right? But he was also a prisoner of war during World War II.
That's right, yeah. And I mean, you can't underestimate the impact that experience must have had on in his whole perspective.
Right, his storytelling.
Exactly. Especially those themes of redemption, suffering, they're so central to his work. And it's interesting because even his first feature film, Les Anges du Péché, that came out in 1943, just a few years after the war.
Wow, so he was already exploring those themes so early on.
He was. I mean, it's clear that period had a profound impact. Now, what's even more interesting and what the podcast really dives into is what they call the Bressonian style.
Okay, Bressonian style. What exactly does that mean?
Well, it's his unique approach to filmmaking, right? And one of the biggest things is that instead of using actors, he used what he called models.
Hold on, model.
Yeah, models. I know, it's a bit strange, right?
So he was literally using, fashion models in his films.
No, not like that. He believed that trained actors, professional actors, they brought this level of artificiality, right?
So too much performing, not enough...
Authenticity. He wanted raw, unfiltered emotion. And he felt these non-professional actors or models could bring that to the screen in a way that trained actors just couldn't.
Interesting. So none of those, big, dramatic Hollywood-style reactions.
Exactly.
Huh. What else? What else is part of this Bressonian style?
Well, it was all about subtlety, restraint, conveying volumes of emotion with just a simple glance, a hesitant gesture.
Sounds like a pretty big departure from the kind of films most people are used to.
Oh, absolutely. But that was the point. He was challenging the audience, He stripped away all the excess, the dramatic music, the over-the-top acting. He wanted to force you to focus on the nuances, the silences, the things that are often left unspoken.
Make you work for it a little bit.
Yeah, but then reward you with a much deeper, more profound experience.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. But what about the stories themselves? What kinds of themes was he exploring?
Well, I mean, his films are known for tackling these really profound philosophical, spiritual questions.
Oh, okay. Like what? Give me an example.
Well, fate, free will, morality, redemption. He wasn't afraid to delve into the complexities of, what it means to be human.
Not exactly light entertainment then.
No, definitely not. I mean, his films are more like meditations, meditations on life, on faith, on the search for meaning in a world that can often feel, I don't know, chaotic.
Right. So not your typical popcorn flick.
Not at all.
Okay, so let's get into some specific examples because I'm really starting to get a sense of how different his films must be. What would you say is a good starting point for someone who's, completely new to Bresson?
Well, one that always comes up is Diary of a Country Priest. So 1951, it's about a young priest who is battling illness, doubt. It's a perfect example of how Bresson could convey these incredibly intense internal struggles, but without ever being melodramatic.
So even with those heavy themes, he's still committed to that minimalist approach.
Absolutely. And then there's A Man Escaped.
Okay.
From 1956, based on a true story, actually, about a prisoner who's meticulously planning his escape from a Nazi prison during World War II.
Oh, wow. I can already imagine how most films would approach a story like that,
Yeah.
all action-packed explosions, the whole...
Right, exactly. But not Bresson. He focuses on the tiny details, the sounds of the prison, the quiet desperation of the main character. I mean, it's a masterclass in suspense, but it's built on restraint, not spectacle.
So he's almost like flipping the script on what we expect from that kind of genre.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's that unconventional approach that makes him so compelling. He doesn't give you easy answers, doesn't try to, spoon feed you emotions. He makes you work for it.
Yeah.
And that's what makes his films so rewarding.
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see how each of his films is like its own world, right?
Yeah.
Offering a unique perspective.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. And, another one to mention is Pickpocket.
Pickpocket.
Yeah, from 1959. This one was actually inspired by Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment.
Oh, wow.
It follows a young man who gets, pulled into a life of crime. And of course, he's wrestling with guilt, seeking redemption, all those, those classic Bressonian themes woven in there.
So he's drawing inspiration from literature, too.
He is. I mean, Bresson was a filmmaker who really thought deeply about his art, wasn't afraid to push those boundaries. And speaking of pushing boundaries,
Yeah.
Au Hasard Balthazar. Have you heard of this one?
I can't say that I have.
This one's from 1966, and it's centered around, get this, a donkey.
Wait, a donkey, seriously.
A donkey! But it's considered one of his most profound and moving films. It's this allegory for human suffering resilience told through the life of this animal.
I gotta admit, I'm intrigued.
It's really something else. It shows his ability to convey really deep emotion through such simplicity.
So each of his films really does offer a completely different experience.
They do. And finally, we have to mention his last film, L'Argent.
L'Argent.
Yeah, made in 1983. And this one really takes aim at greed, societal corruption. It's probably Bresson at his most pointed, cynical, but it's still incredibly powerful.
So even towards the end of his career, he was still grappling with those big philosophical questions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And what's remarkable is that even though his films, they span decades, they tackle very different subjects, there's this consistent thread.
That Bressonian style we were talking about.
Exactly. His unique style, the philosophical depth, it's what makes them instantly recognizable as Bresson's work.
That's so interesting. And that's actually a great segue into what we're going to be talking about next, which is his incredible legacy.
Right.
How this filmmaker, who might not have been, the mainstream name, ended up having such a profound impact on cinema and beyond.
It's a fascinating story.
It is. So stay tuned, folks, because we're about to unpack all of that after the break.
So, it's really amazing when you think about just how far Bresson's influence reaches.
Right, right. I mean, beyond those stylistic choices we talked about.
Yeah, way beyond. Like, his work had a serious impact on some of the biggest names in cinema.
Okay, so let's talk about that legacy, because I'm ready to be impressed. Who are we talking about here? What filmmakers were inspired by Bresson?
Well, we got to start with Andrei Tarkovsky.
Well, of course, the Russian filmmaker.
Yeah, known for films like Solaris, Stalker, visually stunning, deeply philosophical.
Absolutely, those are some heavy hitters.
He was really moved by Bresson's spirituality, that ability to convey the transcendent, but through these simple everyday moments.
So Tarkovsky saw a kindred spirit in Bresson, someone who was using cinema to explore those big existential questions.
Exactly. And then you have Jean-Luc Godard.
A pioneer of the French New Wave.
Right. Think of films like Breathless. He just threw out the rule book of traditional filmmaking.
Oh, for sure.
Godard really admired Bresson for being a true innovator, someone who wasn't afraid to experiment with form and style to create something truly new, groundbreaking.
So even though Bresson's films were often, quiet, introspective, he was still seen as a radical, a rule breaker.
Oh, absolutely. He challenged those conventions of cinema, and that really appealed to filmmakers like Godard who were looking to shake things up. But it's interesting, Bresson's influence goes beyond just those who shared similar styles. Yeah. Even someone like Michael Haneke, whose films, they're known for their unsettling realism, that psychological tension.
Yeah.
He was deeply affected by Bresson.
Now that's interesting, because Haneke's films, they can be pretty disturbing, very different in tone from Bresson's work. What resonated with him?
Well, it was Bresson's use of restraint, his focus on I guess you could say, the darker aspects of human nature.
Right.
Think about a film like Funny Games. It's incredibly disturbing.
Yeah.
But it's that restraint, that slow burn approach that makes it even more unsettling.
So it's not about directly copying Bresson's style.
Right.
It's more about taking certain principles, ideas, and applying them in new ways.
Precisely. And it's not even just directors. The screenwriter Paul Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver, directed First Reformed.
Yeah.
He's been really vocal about his admiration for Bresson. He even wrote a whole book analyzing Bresson's, what he called his transcendental style.
Why?
That ability to achieve this kind of like spiritual depth, but through these very specific cinematic techniques.
Wow, that's some serious dedication. So we're talking a filmmaker who inspired, screenwriters, directors, even film scholars.
And beyond the big names, too, the Dardenne brothers. You familiar with them?
Yeah, known for their social realist films, often set in working-class Belgium.
Exactly. And they've spoken openly about how Bresson influenced them.
Really? How so?
Well, they were particularly inspired by his use of, those non-professional actors and that focus on the dignity of ordinary people.
So it's not just about making, art films. It's about using film to tell stories that matter, stories about real people facing real challenges.
Exactly. And that's, I think, what's so fascinating about Bresson's legacy. All these filmmakers, each with their own distinctive voice, their own style.
Right.
They all found something in Bresson's work that resonated with them, that helped shape their own vision.
Right. And it makes you think, what about those of us who aren't filmmakers? Like, what can we learn from Bresson?
That's a great question because, Bresson's work, it isn't just about cinema, right? It's about paying attention. It's about looking beyond the surface, finding meaning in the, the seemingly mundane.
It's almost like he's offering a different way of seeing the world.
Exactly. And that's something that can be applied to any aspect of life. Think about his emphasis on simplicity, on stripping away the unnecessary to find the essence. Whether you're a writer, a musician, a designer, an entrepreneur, that idea of focusing on the essential, saying more with less, incredibly powerful.
So it's not about being, flashy or over the top. It's about finding the truth, the core, the heart of whatever it is you're trying to express.
Exactly. And it's not just about creativity. Think about Bresson's focus on observation, on paying close attention to detail. That's a skill that can benefit anyone in any field, right?
Totally. Imagine like a doctor who approaches their patients with that kind of attentiveness, or a scientist who's observing the natural world with Bresson's, keen eye for detail.
It's about seeing the world anew, finding beauty and meaning in the everyday, those things we often overlook.
And that ties back into his emphasis on simplicity, right?
He does.
By decluttering our lives, physically, mentally, we create space for what truly matters.
Exactly. Just as his films stripped away that excess to reveal the essence of the story, we can simplify our own lives to focus on what brings us, what brings us joy, what brings us meaning. It's about making conscious choices about what we let into our lives.
Right. What we choose to focus on.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a powerful idea, especially today when we're just constantly bombarded with information, distractions.
That's overwhelming.
It really is. It's about being intentional with our time, our energy.
I like that.
And there's one more aspect of Bresson's legacy that I think is particularly relevant today.
Yeah.
And that's his focus on the inner life, on the struggles, the triumphs of the human spirit. His films, they weren't about escapism. They were about confronting those complexities of human emotion.
Right, that search for meaning, the longing for connection.
So even though his films were made, decades ago, they're still speaking to something fundamental about the human experience.
Exactly, and that's why they continue to resonate with audiences today. In a world that can often feel, superficial, chaotic.
Yeah.
Bresson's films offer this reminder that the most meaningful journey is often an inward one.
It's like he's offering us a path toward a more mindful, more meaningful life, one that's rooted in observation, simplicity, introspection.
Absolutely. And that's a legacy worth celebrating, I think.
For sure. Well, I think we've done a fantastic job unpacking the world of Robert Bresson. We explored his unique filmmaking style, his profound influence on other artists, and even how his ideas can be applied to our own lives.
It's been a really enriching deep dive.
It has. I always find it inspiring to revisit the work of artists who challenge us to see the world differently.
And who knows, maybe this deep dive will inspire some of you listening out there to to seek out Bresson's films, or even to, maybe find ways to apply his principles of simplicity, observation, introspection to your own creative endeavors.
Yeah.
Or even just to your everyday life.
That would be amazing.
It would. So thanks for joining us on a deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those aha moments coming. So we've talked about how Bresson's films have inspired other filmmakers.
Right, right. But his ideas, they kind of go way beyond just cinema,
Yeah, you mentioned that, like, his influence extends to other art forms.
Yeah.
Even to how we approach life itself.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm really curious about this. Like, give me some concrete examples. How could a filmmaker like Bresson possibly influence, say, architecture?
Well, think about Bresson's emphasis on simplicity, functionality, the use of natural light.
Right.
These are all principles that a lot of architects, especially those who lean towards like minimalist or modernist aesthetics, they find incredibly valuable.
So stripping away all that unnecessary ornamentation, letting the essential elements of a structure speak for themselves.
Exactly. There's this Japanese architect, Tadao Ando.
Okay.
He's known for his use of concrete, these geometric forms, this incredible interplay of light and shadow, and his work, while very much his own, it shares a certain kinship, I think, with Bresson's visual language.
I see it, that shared appreciation for clean lines, stark beauty, finding power and restraint.
Exactly. And it's not just about aesthetics either. It's Bresson's ability to create a specific mood, an atmosphere through these carefully chosen details.
Oh, interesting.
That translates beautifully to architecture.
So you're saying an architect could design a space to evoke a certain feeling, like Bresson did with his films.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine like a museum, designed to foster a sense of contemplation, or a library that encourages quiet focus. These are spaces where Bresson's influence might be, subtly but profoundly felt.
Wow, this is blowing my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
It's amazing how we can find these connections in such unexpected places. But what about other fields? Like, does Bresson's work have any relevance to something like writing?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, his emphasis on economy of language, on choosing each word with precision, purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lesson any writer can take to heart.
So it's about saying more with less, avoiding those unnecessary flourishes, letting the words themselves carry the weight of the meaning.
You got it. There's this short story writer, Raymond Carver. I love his work.
Okay.
And it's known for this incredible stark realism, minimalist style. It's almost as if he took Bresson's like cinematic language and applied it to the written word.
Yeah.
He strips away all those extraneous details just to focus on the raw essence of human experience.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'm definitely gonna have to check out his work. But let's bring this back to our listener, right? Like, what if you're not an architect, you're not a writer? How can you apply Bresson's ideas to your own life?
That's the million-dollar question. One way, I think, is to cultivate a sense of mindfulness.
Okay.
To really pay attention to the details of your everyday life, just as Bresson's camera lingered on these seemingly insignificant moments. We can train ourselves to appreciate the beauty, the significance of the ordinary.
So slowing down, taking the time to notice the way light plays on a wall, or the sound of rain falling, or even the subtle expressions on someone's face.
Exactly. It's about seeing the world with fresh eyes, appreciating those small things that we often miss when we're just rushing through life.
And that ties back into Bresson's emphasis on simplicity, right?
It does.
By decluttering our lives, physically and mentally, we create space for what truly matters.
Absolutely. Just as his films stripped away that excess to reveal the essence of the story, we can simplify our lives to focus on what brings us joy, what brings us meaning. It's about making those conscious choices about what we let into our lives, what we choose to focus our attention on.
Right, exactly.
And I think that's such a powerful concept, especially in today's world when we're bombarded with information, distractions.
It's completely overwhelming.
It is. It's about being intentional with our time, our energy.
Yeah. I love that.
And finally, we can learn from Bresson's focus on the inner life. His films were all about exploring those complexities of human emotion,
right?
The struggles, the triumphs of the soul. By cultivating self-awareness, introspection, we can, we can better understand ourselves, connect more deeply with others.
Taking that time for reflection.
Yeah.
Pondering those big questions.
Yeah.
Exploring our own motivations, desires.
Right.
Recognizing that the most meaningful journey is often an inward one.
Exactly. And that's a message that really resonates, I think, in our fast-paced, often superficial world.
It really does. Well, I think we've done a brilliant job exploring the world of Robert Bresson today. We've uncovered his unique filmmaking style, his profound influence on other artists, and how his ideas can be, applied to our own lives.
It's been a really rewarding journey. I always find it so inspiring to revisit the work of artists who challenge us to see the world differently.
Me too, me too. And who knows, maybe this deep dive will inspire some of you listening to seek out Bresson's films, or to, maybe even find ways to apply his principles of simplicity, observation, introspection to your own creative endeavors, or even just to your everyday life.
That would be wonderful.
It would. So thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those aha moments coming.